Hey guys, hopefully you've had a good weekend. You've started some of your revision for our mid-year exam. We're just going to highlight a few things that are going to be good for you to know, useful information, tips and things that might help you study for your mid-year exam coming up later this week. So to begin with, your mid-year exam is on Thursday, and it's at 8:50 a.m. Okay, so make sure you're here in time. Try to get here at least a little bit early so that when you get in to the exam, you're not rushed and all those sort of things. So what is this going to be? Well, it's 150 minutes plus 15 minutes reading time. Now there are three sections, which makes sense because they're what we've covered, and that means if it's 150 minutes, then it's approximately 50 minutes for each section. Okay. Now you don't need to stick to those strictly as 50 minutes each, but that's a guideline as to how long it should take. Now what I'm going to do is start off with some general information that might be helpful, some good places to start with your revision, and then I'll sort of narrow it down to things in particular that you might want to look at when you're studying each of the three topics, and then at the end some tips for when you're in the exam, things that you might want to do. Okay. So to begin with, we'll start with some good places to start when you're studying. The first thing I want to mention is to make sure you know your formula sheet. Alright, you must know all of the things that are on your formula sheet that are helpful. For instance, there are a lot of you, that in some of the tests so far, there's been questions where the formula is written right in front of you, and for whatever reason you haven't realised it's there, or you haven't looked at it, or you didn't know how to use it, and you're just bleeding marks if that is the case for you. There's some important things in there, so make sure you have a look and know what everything means. In particular, we'll sort of go through some of the more important things. With right-angled trigonometry, it actually tells you that these formulas here are for ones with right angles, triangles with right angles. If there is no right angle, we are using non-right angled trig. You know what rules there are. This diagram in particular is really helpful. It tells you where each side and angle are in relation to one another, which is really important in this particular equation where particularly lowercase a and cos a, it's indicating that they must be opposite one another, a side and its opposite angle. Okay, so make sure you know that. Not only that, but this diagram is also used for this formula for area, half AB sine C. Well, AB, and if you know the angle in between these two sides, that is what you would use for the area. So there are a number of things. Make sure you know these things and what they do. Make sure, remember, we sort of did these in a table format in terms of you've got kilometres and nautical miles, you've got great circle, small circle, and you can identify which equation you need to use. Things like this diagram, knowing how to calculate the arc length, or whether or not it is one of the questions where you're looking at the latitude and longitude, you need to know those as well as the fact that it gives you some of the time zones of places in Australia, whether it's Central Standard Time, Western Standard Time, or even Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you check that. Now, for bivariate data, some of the things that you need to know, if we look over the page, it has some basics with linear functions. It has your table where you can work out your correlation of coefficient and whether it's strong positive or weak negative, etc., the values that you're looking for. As well as, remember, it tells you the templated response for the variation in your data through the coefficient of determination. Also gives you how to determine residuals and the process for deseasonalizing data. Most recently, with sequences and series, it gives you some important things to do with arithmetic and geometric sequences and series. It gives you all of the formulas, but in particular, these graphs here, it shows you what, linear growth and decay. It says that they are arithmetic sequences, exponential growth and decay, geometric, and it shows you steady state here and gives you some of the values that might cause those shapes. You also have your difference equations, but what I want you to be able to look at and recognise is these two here, annuities in advance and arrears. We will not be looking at those at this stage, okay? So don't worry about those. If you're looking at them thinking, I have no idea what that is, well, we haven't really covered that yet, and we actually cover those in finance. So don't worry about those. But make sure you look through this, you know what you have available to you in the exam. So, know your formula sheet is the first one. Number 2 is to know your calculator booklet. Now, if you've lost it, there is an electronic version on the hub on our homepage, so you can access it there if you've lost it. This is super important. It'll go through all of the things you need to know on your calculator. Perhaps that is residuals and plotting those, or it could be anything else that we've looked at. So make sure you read through that, the sections on trig, sequences and series and bivariate data, and look for the things that you might need to know from that. Number 3, past exams. They are on the TASC website. There's a link on our on our page on the hub for you to get to those. They're really helpful, and I'll show you how to get to those in just a minute. Okay, whoa, we've got some inception going on here. Hang on. Now, hopefully, this will be right. Whoa. Okay, I think you can see this. So I can't see it on my other screen, so I'm assuming that you can see this, hopefully. So, what we now have is your general maths page. Now, if we scroll down here, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. Firstly, those mid-year exams are down here in the supporting documents, including external assessment material. If you come down here, all the past exams are here, as well as you'll notice that on one of these it says the assessment panel report and solutions. Now this is really important because not only does it give you the solutions, but almost more importantly, they actually go through each question and the examiners write all the things that they found that students were doing, whether that was good or bad, some of the things that they found which they wanted to mention. Okay, so make sure you have a look at that. It basically tells you what we're looking for each question. It also tells you what some of the common mistakes were as well. So they do that for every question in the exam, but at the bottom you can see that there are not only answers but also solutions for each of the exams. So you can use those as a means of studying. The second thing I want to point out is to do with the course content. If you click on this tab, what this does is it sort of outlines everything you need to know for the different areas that we cover. So you'll notice this first heading is bivariate data, and what this does is go through dot points of everything that you need to know in bivariate data. So you can use this as like a checklist of things that you need to make sure you know how to do before our exam. So you can see that for bivariate data, it goes from here all the way down to here. Okay, so there's a fair bit for bivariate data. If we scroll down, we've got growth and decay. We've got the things that you need to know there. Not as much for those. And then if you keep scrolling down, we get to trigonometry, and it tells you all of the things you need to know there as well. So a really handy option for you for actually looking at and working out, what things do I need to know and how do I actually do it. Okay? So, make sure you look at the past exams, and I'll also mention in there for number 4, TASC website for course content. Okay, so you need to make sure that you know those as well. So we'll sort of move now into some of the things to do for each subject. Now, I'm going to write down here number 5 here, because before we get into it, make sure you look over your past tests and assignments. Now, not everything is going to be in those, particularly the tests, because we've only got a certain amount of time in a test, so we can't assess everything. So make sure you do check over the past tests and assignments, because they are generally a pretty good indication of the sorts of questions that we might be asking in an exam type situation. In addition to this, and this is number 6, look in your books for when I have told you to mark out test or exam questions. Remember I say to put a big box around it or whatever. Make sure you look over those, because obviously I've told you to do that for a reason, and it's something that will likely be in your test or your exam. So that's it for the general stuff. Now we'll sort of look into the specific things for each subject that you might want to cover. So for trig, we've got that section. We've also got bivariate data. And our third section is sequence and series. So there are 3. Now, in terms of your studying of these 3, sequences and series, that's what you sort of have just done. And in some ways, it's probably the one that I'm least concerned about in terms of how you go, because we haven't even done our first test yet. Don't mind that bell. And so what I'm not too concerned with that, and it's what you've done last. So I'd studied that last. Bivariate data, well, we just sort of debriefed the test not too long ago, so that should be reasonably fresh. Trigonometry, that would have been quite a while ago now, and one that you may have forgotten some of the stuff on. So how should you study? Well, I think in addition, or after you've done these things here, 1 through to 6, it's really helpful to, in conjunction with going through the course content for trig, so you can see all those dot points, the contents page for trigonometry is a really good place to start. You can sort of view this like a checklist as well, and actually mark out, okay, these are all the sections that I need to know, and sort of go through a bit like a checklist in that regard. So something that you can do is go through those and look at each section and the types of questions that you would need to do. In addition to that, just make sure that you do some of the questions. There's no substitute for actually doing questions. Make sure you go through the questions I've set on the hub, look for ones that are hard, and do those ones, because they're likely to be the ones that we see in an exam. Okay? So look through the contents page. As a checklist. Now for bivariate data, that's the one that we have done most recently. And again, you can use the contents page again as a checklist in addition to the course content that we mentioned up here on the task website. So make sure you do that. But in addition to that, I think what's really helpful is to try and write out or organize or do something to write out all the templated responses in this unit. So the responses and when to use them. In terms of write down when is it that you should use this particular templated response. Because remember, in bivariate data, there's lots of things that we're looking for, whether it's a correlation response, you know, strong positive or weak negative or no correlation, or whether it's a residual point, being able to explain what that means, or whether it's explaining the y-intercept and the x-intercept of something, or whether it's using something like the coefficient of determination, whether it's for deseasonalized data, explaining what those points are, or explaining what a seasonal index is. There is probably half a dozen to 10 different templated responses that we're looking for pretty specific wording on. So a good idea to actually identify those so that you take the confusion out of what goes where, what do I use when, and what are those responses. So a good idea for those. Okay. Now, sequences and series, for that, it's really just about going over the stuff that we've done in class very recently. I will be doing a debrief video with your assignment. For assignment. I'll do that probably today, but it might not go up until tomorrow, only because I won't want to put it up until I've received everyone's assignments. But that'll go up probably tomorrow morning, debriefing that assignment, which will be very helpful for this section. Okay. Now, how long should you spend on each section? In the exam, that's as far as the study goes, how you should go about it. In my experience, first thing I would do is go through each of the books, go through the theory, have a go at some questions in each section if you can. That would be brilliant, particularly the things that you're not so confident about. Then I would be looking through your tests and assignments and seeing if you can do those questions. And then finally, as some revision, go through perhaps some past exams as an idea for those as well. Okay? Make sure you time yourself. That's a good idea to use, particularly with past exams, to see how you go in terms of will you have enough time to complete them. I'm going to switch now to, in the exam, what should you look to do? Now, you've got 150 minutes, as I said before, plus the 15 minutes reading time. For the reading time, I do think it's important to read through all the questions in each section first. I think that's important to see if there's anything that you don't understand, to ask questions in this time, particularly if there's just part of a question that you're not sure what it means. So go through that, make sure you have a look through there and read all of the questions. You've then got about 50 minutes for each section. However, we won't take any of the booklets from you at certain intervals, so you really have the whole time to sort of flip back and forth through the three sections. My advice to you is that trig is often one of the ones that can take a lot of time. Students tend to get bogged down in that. So if you're going to start with that first, then please make sure to try and be strict with your time management. Now, to help you with that, each question says how many minutes it should take you approximately to do, and it's essentially the number of marks is the same as the number of minutes. So if it's an 11-minute question, it's worth about 11 marks. If it's worth 3 marks, that's 3 minutes. So use that as a good guide as to whether you're taking too long. You really can't afford to be bogged down on one question for too long. So if you do find that one is taking you too long, skip it and come back to it. So my advice is to start in the section that you feel most comfortable with, go there first, and then work your way towards the one that you're least confident in. However, please try and stick as much to this 50 minutes per booklet as you can, because we do want you to make sure you do as well as you can across all three. The other thing I will say to do is to try and make sure that you do the questions you know how to do first. Obviously, don't just read through it, and if at first it doesn't jump out to you as how to do it, don't necessarily skip it, read through it again. But there's no point wasting a large amount of time on something that you don't know how to do if that means that you don't get round to questions that you could do. There's nothing more frustrating than getting to the end and we say pens down, and then you look over the page and realise that there was 5 marks worth of questions that you did know how to do, you just didn't get time to do it. So make sure that you do that. A strategy I like to use is if I do skip a question in the exam, have a piece of paper next to you and write down the question that you've skipped. Perhaps you could do that on your formula sheet or something like that, because what that will do is help you to know where to come back to later. It's very easy in sort of the rush of it that if you skip a question, you can perhaps miss going back and doing it later on because you're sort of flipping through and you might not see the question that you haven't done. So as you skip them, perhaps just write down, question 1B or question 3D or 4G or maybe question 6 in total, and write those down so that you know where to come back to later. So you've got each of your 3 sections, as I mentioned, about 1 mark per minute. And make sure you start sort of in the easiest area and keep moving through. Please make sure that you read each question carefully. There are some tricky wordings in there. Look for the words in bold. They are generally helpful. And another bit of advice to know is if something is worth 1 mark, you essentially don't need any working out. Okay, so if it's 1 mark, you don't need to do any working out. However, if it's any more than 1 mark, then you will need to show some sort of working out. Okay, so as a debrief, essentially what I would do is to begin with, I'd start up here. I'd look at your formula sheet, your calculator booklet. I'd then go to the course content on the TASC website. Remember, there's a link on our hub page. Link on hub. And then I'd look over the past tests and assignments. Then in each section, go through each of those, have a look at the tests and assignments, have a go at some questions and some past exams. Okay? Remember in the exam to just go through, try and work on the things you know how to do, and try and look at the time limits that it recommends and try and stick to those if you can. The last thing I will mention is, remember, this is not the be-all and end-all. Alright, this is only one exam. It's a mid-year exam. It's a good time for me to see where you're at and a good sort of reality check for you to see how much you know. But it is only that. It's just a check. Alright? It's not if your mark in this is going to definitely go forward. You're going to have other opportunities later on in the year. So don't stress too much about it. Obviously, we want you to do your best, but please remember to put it into perspective. I might finish it up there. If you have any questions, let me know. Send me an email and I'm more than happy to help out. Either that or you can come on in and see me if you need to. One thing I will mention at the end is I just realised when some students came and saw me, I still have your trig tests. Okay, so if you want to get your trig test back, which I think would be very helpful, come and see me because I do still have those. I'm sorry, I didn't realise that I hadn't handed them back to you. So make sure you come and see me for your trig test. Okay? I might leave it there. Good luck with your study this week and in your mid-year exam later on. Remember, Thursday, 8:50. Try and get there a little bit earlier if you can. Alright, see you guys.